Marine and his K9's incredible act of kindness. You won't believe what they did for a hungry girl. The chatter in Jake Thompson's small Midwestern town dulled into a quiet hum as people turned to whisper about him, their reverence flirting dangerously with suspicion. It had been months since he returned from overseas, but the ghosts of war clung to him like a second skin. The weight of memories pressed heavy on his shoulders, yet he hid it all behind a resolute exterior. While Rex, his loyal K9 partner, trotted beside him, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that everyone saw him as a hero. They couldn't understand the scars beneath his bravado. As he walked through the empty streets, the corners of his hometown showed signs of neglect. Stores with "going out of business" signs hung limply in windows. Families struggled to put food on the table, and murmurs of desperation filled the air. One afternoon, while escorting Rex through the neighborhood, a haunting sight stopped Jake in his tracks. There, rummaging through a grocery store dumpster, was Lily, a girl no older than 8, her small hands desperately sifting through scraps. Jake's heart tightened, memories flooding him. Warm family dinners, shared laughter, a sense of security. It was everything Lily should have, everything he had cherished, now overshadowed by this heartbreaking reality. A sense of urgency ignited in him, fueled by the values his parents instilled in him. He couldn't turn a blind eye to the hungry, the vulnerable. That moment crystallized his purpose. He would act. Determined to make a difference, Jake poured his energy into organizing food drives, driven by the prospect of not just helping Lily, but also others in the community who were slipping through the cracks. But as the days turned into weeks, skepticism rose from the shadowed corners of town. Whispers of doubt began to land heavy in his gut. They saw him as a burden rather than a beacon of hope. With Rex by his side, Jake forged ahead, distributing flyers, knocking on doors, pleading for their support. Doubt swirled in his mind. Were his efforts in vain? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as he believed he was gaining traction, rumors snagged him like barbed wire. Whispers that he was merely using these food drives for attention. The once supportive townsfolk eyed him with a mix of doubt and caution, shaking the very foundations of his efforts. Jake wrestled with shame and overwhelming frustration. Should he defend his intentions, or refocus on the real issue? Lily's plight. Devising his next move weighed heavily on him, a storm of conflicting thoughts swirling relentlessly in his mind. He overheard murmurs at the local diner, some showing support, but others cutting like daggers. With each comment, his resolve felt brittle, breaking beneath the pressure, teetering on the edge of despair. Would they ever see past their misconceptions? Could they recognize a hero, even when he struggled with his own demons? The decision loomed before him as Rex nudged his leg, a silent, steadfast promise. He couldn't back down now. As he felt the tension in the air, Jake sought an opening. He needed to cut through the doubt before everything slipped through the cracks like sand in an hourglass. The stakes were rising. Would he have the courage to emerge into the light, or would fear keep him shrouded in shadows? The battle within him raged on, with no clear resolution in sight. Jake awoke the next morning, the weight of uncertainty still pressing heavily on his chest. The sun pierced through the curtained window, but the warmth barely reached him in the chill of his room. He lay there, contemplating the faces of the people who had doubted him, the whispers echoing in his mind like the distant sound of gunfire on his last tour. Perhaps he had painted himself into a corner, relying on goodwill where suspicion had taken root. As he dressed, his hands trembled. Could he truly convince the town? Could he become the hero Lily needed, even while he felt so hollow inside? The scars he bore felt insurmountable, and yet, the thought of Lily's situation fueled his determination, a flicker of resolve in an otherwise dim outlook. Rex sensed his turmoil, pacing nearby with an attention that steadied Jake's will. "We're not backing down," he said softly. It was not only a promise to Rex, but also to himself, the pledge resonating deeply. He had to prove to the naysayers that his intentions were sincere, that their doubts could not dismantle the goal he had set, to bring food and hope to the hungry. At the local park, Jake set up a small table adorned with posters and flyers announcing the first food drive. His heart raced with anticipation and trepidation as people strolled by, some casting glances of curiosity, while others offered nothing more than fleeting disdain. He could feel the tension in the air and wished he could turn back time, to stand before those who had questioned him and explain what they didn't understand. With each passerby, he practiced his pitch, rehearsing lines that spoke from his heart rather than sound bites. "It's not about me. It's about her. It's about all the kids who need a plate on their table." Yet in the quiet moments when he was alone with Rex, doubt clawed at him, whispering bitter truths about his limitations. As evening approached, hope appeared when a familiar figure approached. Rachel, an old friend from high school who had always harbored a sense of kindness. He saw her tighten her grip on the grocery bag in her hand, a thoughtful look etched upon her face. "Jake, I wanted to hear about what you're doing. I was worried," she said gently, her eyes searching for threads of sincerity. Jake hesitated, weighing his words. "It's not just about collecting food, Rachel. It's about giving these kids like Lily a chance at something normal. I want to help them." He faltered, his vulnerability surfacing. "But I'm afraid it's just not enough." Rachel stepped closer, eyes softening. "You're trying. That's more than most people do." A rush of warmth ignited within him. Perhaps Rachel could be the bridge that connected him back to the community. That small conversation sparked an idea. If he could rally even a few supporters, he might shift the town's perception. He handed Rachel a flyer and began discussing his plans with fervor, the words pouring out. Alongside them, more familiar faces began to gather, intrigued by the weight of sincerity they saw in him. But just as hope danced on the horizon, Jake noticed a figure nearby, an older man observing closely, bitterness etched across his features. Jake felt the tension rise anew. He knew that man's reputation, knew the doubts he had spread. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The path ahead remained fraught with challenge, and Jake realized he would need allies. Not everyone would accept him after the shadows he carried home. The stakes were higher than ever, and it was time to confront the very disbelievers who sought to undermine him. Gripping Rex's collar tightly, he steeled himself. The moment had come to face the darkness together with the light. Could he gather enough strength to dismantle the accusations and uncover what truly allowed a community to light a path out of the shadows? The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a haunting glow as his thoughts quickened, igniting fear and determination alike. Could he rise above the doubts that tainted his purpose, or was he destined to remain shackled by the past? The following days were a whirlwind, each moment filled with dread and purpose as Jake immersed himself in what felt like an uphill battle against his own past and the whispers of doubt lurking in the town. He could still picture the bitter gaze of that older man in the park, a reminder that not everyone would be swayed by sincerity alone. Ignoring the unease squatting in his chest, he pushed forward. Each flyer he handed out, and each conversation he engaged in with the townsfolk felt like a small victory. But the gnawing fear at the back of his mind persisted. What if it wasn't enough? Uncertainty seeped into his thoughts like an unwelcome visitor, questioning his every decision. Each time he saw the dejected faces of children like Lily, his resolve solidified. If he could channel all the doubt into action, maybe, just maybe, he could create a ripple effect that might bring about change. On a particularly rainy afternoon, he sat in the diner nursing a cup of coffee, the steam fogging up the window, mirroring the haze in his mind. As Rex lay at his feet, Jake's thoughts drifted to the upcoming food drive, less than a week away. Would anyone actually show up? Would they come to help? Or to gawk? Among the hustle and bustle of rushing customers, a voice broke through his fog. "Mind if I sit here?" It was Rachel again, her warm smile offering brief solace amid his turmoil. Jake nodded, gesturing to the seat across from him. You seem deep in thought, she observed, her eyes studying him carefully. It's this drive, Jake admitted, rubbing his temples as if to chase away the impending headache. I can't shake the feeling that it's just not enough. Rachel leaned forward, her expression firm yet encouraging. What if you looked at it differently? You've got a few people already interested in helping. It's not just about the numbers but the impact, she said. You remember gym class? It's not always about the best athlete, it's about teamwork. Her comment struck a chord. Teamwork. He had been trying to shoulder this burden alone, believing he had to prove himself as a solitary miracle worker. But perhaps he needed to shift his perspective. Should I reach out to more people then? He questioned, the idea igniting a flicker of hope. Absolutely. Don't shy away from asking for help, Jake. Emboldened by Rachel's encouragement, he began crafting a plan to include local businesses, schools, and even the church. He sketched a list of potential allies, diligently mapping how to reach them in a way that was genuine without appearing desperate. As the week progressed, each call he made unveiled hidden connections he didn't know existed. The woman from the bakery suggested creating a collection bin for non-perishables. The local youth organization offered to volunteer on the day of the drive. Each supportive response felt like a building block, slowly fortifying the foundation of what once seemed impossible. Yet, just when the light began to shine through the cracks of doubt, a new challenge emerged. The older man he had seen before came into the diner, seated in the corner booth with another man, their whispered conversations punctuated by pointed glances in Jake's direction. The pit in Jake's stomach deepened. Their presence was like a threat, an unspoken accusation hanging in the air. Resolute, he decided to confront them. The idea sent adrenaline coursing through his veins as he slid out of his seat, locking eyes with Rachel, who gave him an encouraging nod. He could feel the weight of all he stood for pressing against him like armor. This time, he wasn't backing down. Could he finally address the doubts head-on? Or was this confrontation the very key that could either unlock his path or shatter it completely? The moment Jake stepped away from the comfort of the diner's orange vinyl booth, the world outside felt both familiar and foreign. The older man's scowl had been a shadow that loomed over his ambition, and as he approached, Jake's heart pounded with a mix of courage and trepidation. Mind if I join you? Jake forced the words out before he could lose his nerve. The two men glanced up, momentarily caught off guard by his forwardness. The older man's eyes narrowed slightly, sizing him up. Something on your mind, son? The older man replied. His tone clipped, yet curiosity danced in his gaze. Jake noted the calculating look that came from both men, the weight of judgment hanging in the air like a thick fog. Yeah, actually, Jake began, inking the clear line between confrontation and detente. I'm organizing a food drive. I think there's a lot we could do together to help the community. The older man snorted, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed defensively. Community. You think you can just waltz in here and make a difference? This town doesn't need your kind of charity. What do you know about struggle? Each word felt like a stone thrown at Jake, hard and stinging. Questions ignited in his mind. What did he know? He had lived through his own battles. Struggle isn't a badge of honor. It's a reason to act, he replied, with more conviction than he felt. I'm not here to pretend I understand everyone's journey. But I am here to listen, if you'll let me. The second man, younger yet with a resolute gaze, finally spoke up. What makes you think we'll trust you? You're just a guy with a plan. What if it's all talk? Jake's resolve hardened. Maybe it starts with trust and respect. I'm reaching out because I believe in the potential here, not just for me but for everyone. If you have doubts, I'd like to hear them so I can do better. But I can't do it alone. The older man's expression softened slightly, as if a switch had flicked on. So, what's your plan exactly? Jake outlined his vision as succinctly as he could, the specifics tumbling out as he leaned into his passion. He spoke of the partnerships forming, of local businesses rallying to support his cause, and how, in a few short days, they would be drawing in anyone willing to lend a hand. Are you sure they'll show? The younger man asked skeptically. I'm not convinced everyone will, but I believe some will, and it might be enough to make a difference for at least a few. Just like you and me, right? Jake gestured between the three of them, pointing to each man. It's about the numbers, but even more importantly, it's about the faces behind them. The silence that followed felt charged, like the tension before a summer storm. Jake could almost see the gears turning in their minds, a blend of skepticism and curiosity. Then he added one more point that he hoped hit home. You both were once kids. What would have made a difference for you back then? Their eyes flickered with something. Recognition, perhaps, tinged with conflict. The older man shifted in his booth, the vulnerability peeking through the hardened exterior. Maybe you've got a point, the older man finally conceded. But talk is cheap. We need actions, and I expect to see more than just words from you, kid. Absolutely, Jake affirmed, feeling a surge of unexpected exhilaration. I'll show you both. I want to make this work. Let's find common ground, together. As he walked back to Rachel, a weight of uncertainty still lingered in his heart, but it was mixed with a newfound spark of determination. This confrontation was a small victory, yet it echoed with potential. What more could he uncover by stepping even further into the unknown? The week ahead would hinge on the food drive, but it was also about harnessing the connections he had just made. Would this be the turning point he needed, or simply another challenge to overcome? His mind raced with next steps, but each pulse of adrenaline sparked a reminder of the importance of moving forward. The moment he thought about retreating, the familiar image of Lily's hopeful gaze refocused his vision. What if his next steps would lead him to discover a different type of strength within himself, one that could not only support the community but reshape it? With that thought igniting his spirit, he took a deep breath, set his jaw, and prepared for the truth that lay ahead. What lay in store, he wondered, as he turned the corner toward his path. Jake could hardly sleep that night. The conversation replayed in his mind like a relentless loop, each word nitpicking at the corners of his thoughts. The older man's skepticism, the younger man's challenge, and the underlying fragility of trust, all churned within him. What had begun as ambition felt now intertwined with doubt. The following morning, he sat in his small apartment poring over the details for the food drive as if they were his lifeblood. He needed a strategy to connect with the community, to foster the very trust that had been so readily questioned. Various ideas crashed into each other, flyers and social media posts, perhaps direct visits to local businesses. Yet, with every plan, another nagging voice whispered a counterpoint. What if no one cared? Deciding on a direct approach, he gathered a handful of brochures he had printed the night before and headed to the local market. The fragrance of fresh produce mixed with the distinct smell of cleaning supplies, welcoming him as he pushed through the glass door. The owner, Mr. Henderson, was accommodating but cautious. "Jake, good to see you," he smiled, though the glint in his eyes hinted at uncertainty. "What's this about?" Jake launched into his appeal, speaking rapidly yet carefully. He explained how they could leverage the store's foot traffic to reach potential contributors and encourage participation. "If you lend us your space and support, I believe it would really resonate. This isn't just a charity, it's a way to galvanize community spirit," he added, trying hard to convey not only the necessity, but the impact of their collaboration. "Community spirit, huh?" Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "What if people don't care?" "What if they do?" Jake countered. "What if this becomes a catalyst for change? I'd rather know that I tried than live in the what if." Mr. Henderson paused, weighing Jake's energy against risk. Finally, he nodded. "All right, let's give it a shot, but you'll need to take care of yourself. This will take perseverance." "Yes, thank you," Jake said, an electric jolt of encouragement coursing through him. This was a small victory, but it fueled his resolve. Jake spent the rest of the day hammering out specifics. With each phone call to local businesses, he felt an internal shift, an evolution of his self-doubt into a calculated confidence. They responded with skepticism initially, but as he clarified the benefits and laid out plans, their defenses lowered. Each yes served as a small reinforcement of his belief in the project and himself. Later, back at home, he reflected on what had shifted internally. The empowerment he felt wasn't just about the food drive. It was about confronting the anxious parts of himself. He had managed to turn conversation into action, uncertainty into opportunity. He was finding his voice not just as an organizer, but as someone capable of instigating change. But even as his spirit soared, he felt shadows of doubt creeping back. Deep beneath the exhilaration lay an unresolved tension. The old man's words kept echoing. Talk is cheap. What if actions weren't enough? What if the stakes were higher than he understood? With that thought curdling in his gut, he realized he had yet to confront his own fears head-on. The real test wasn't merely the efficacy of the food drive, but facing the deeper anxieties. Could he truly connect with people? Could he lead without losing himself in the complexities of it all? As he prepared for the week ahead, a knot tightened in his stomach with anticipation. He had taken steps forward, but there was still more to face. Would his confrontation with the community yield the trust he yearned for, or would it expose weaknesses he wasn't ready to confront? The hour was late, but a fire ignited within him, compelling him to press onward. He closed his eyes, imagining their faces, the hope in each exchange clinging to his psyche, reaffirming a single thought. Change began here, no matter how uncomfortable the journey would be. The moment was approaching, and he could sense it. Would he rise to the challenge, or would this land him back at square one? The next day, Jake awoke with restless anticipation thrumming in his chest. He had laid the groundwork at the market, but today was critical. He needed to step beyond familiar territory and engage directly with the community. The sun pouring through his window felt less like a beacon of hope and more like an implicit challenge. He could almost hear the doubts in the back of his mind whispering, "You're not ready." As he stepped out onto the sidewalk, the warmth of the sun forced him to pause and take a deep breath. This was it. No more hiding behind ideas or outreach materials. Today, he needed to put himself on the line. Dressed in jeans and a clean collared shirt, he projected an image of someone determined. Yet inside, self-doubt coursed through him like ice water. Jake ambled down the street to a local park that buzzed with morning energy. Children played, dog owners chatted, and vendors set up their stalls, creating an inviting community atmosphere. But in the swirl of activity, Jake felt the flicker of hesitation. He found a bench and sat down, attempting to amplify his often overlooked resolve. What if people rejected him? What if he was met with indifference? Shaking off the apprehension, he took out a small notebook and began jotting down thoughts. Each phrase he wrote became a mantra. "You're here to give, not to receive," he scrawled. "Connect, don't convince." These words served as anchors, marshaling his focus as he prepared to engage. After a few minutes, Jake stood, forcing himself toward the cluster of people near the vendor stands. Ready to embrace his role, he approached a woman who was handing out samples of organic smoothies. "Hi there, I'm Jake," he introduced himself, "and I'm working on a project that aims to help those in need throughout our community. I was wondering if you'd be open to a conversation about how we might collaborate." The woman, intrigued but cautious, raised an eyebrow. "You're asking for something, aren't you?" Her directness took Jake slightly aback, but he stood firm. "I wouldn't call it just asking, more of forging a connection. I believe we can pool our resources for something impactful." She leaned back slightly, assessing him. Just when he feared she might dismiss him, a flicker of curiosity danced across her face. They began to discuss potential partnerships, her initial skepticism melting into genuine interest as he painted a picture of how they could mobilize efforts in creative and meaningful ways. As Jake moved from one conversation to another, he felt himself shedding layers of uncertainty. People responded positively, intrigued by his passion, rather than resistant to it. His excitement grew with each exchange, yet a lurking voice continued to challenge his self-assurance. What if they really don't care? What if you're deluding yourself? Jake parked the thoughts at the periphery of his mind, focusing instead on the positive feedback. The real breakthrough came when he approached a group of high school students hanging around a food truck. He could feel the pulse of youth that resonated with his message. "What if I told you helping those in need could actually involve you?" He posed the question playfully. One student asked, What's in it for us? That feeling you get when you know you made a difference. That's a pretty big something, don't you think? Jake replied, directly challenging the group's immediate dismissal. Their initial indifference slowly softened. Through groups and conversations, a pivotal moment unfolded. Jake realized the more he challenged himself to step forward, the more he catalyzed others' interest. He wasn't just gathering resources, he was creating an atmosphere of enthusiasm and engagement. But as he reveled in these newfound connections, the gnawing doubt clawed at him, echoing that their investment in him could be fleeting, built upon the flimsy foundation of an idealistic venture. But he couldn't dwell on fears now. He was in a momentum where doubt threatened to halt progress. Deeper than his struggle to convince was a challenge to comprehend what true commitment entailed, both from himself and others. As he concluded for the day, Jake realized every connection he made was a two-way street. It wasn't merely about the food drive. It was profoundly personal, confronting the very essence of trust and vulnerability in human relationships. With the evening settling in, he felt invigorated, yet unsettled. Moving forward promised both the clarity he sought and the potential for deeper existential revelations. Would he uncover the tenacity needed to lead, or merely uncover the abyss of his insecurities gnawing at the edges? The weight of the upcoming week pressed down on him, thick with the notion that he was on the brink of a significant breakthrough, if only he dared to confront what lay beneath. This was no longer just about community support. It was about his very capacity to inspire, and to risk everything once more. Jake woke the next morning enveloped in a sense of urgency. The exhilaration of the previous day had faded into a gnawing anxiety that wrapped around his thoughts like a vice. He'd made strides, yes, but there were no guarantees. Each connection he sparked seemed fragile, balancing on a tightrope between interest and indifference. Sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee, he recalled the faces of the people he had engaged with, their expressions shifting from skepticism to curiosity. Yet, beneath the surface of this nostalgia, thrummed a question. Did they see him as a genuine changemaker, or just another dreamer with fleeting enthusiasm? Determined to build on his initial momentum, Jake opened his notebook. The pages were filled with half-formed ideas and strategies, but he felt unable to see beyond the first steps. He needed to deepen his approach, to cultivate something more than just a passing interest. The worry that his efforts were merely a drop in the ocean intensified. If he wanted to inspire genuine change, he needed to confront not only the external landscape, but the internal barriers he imposed on himself. He decided to dig deeper. His phone buzzed, indicating a message from a local newspaper reporter who had taken an interest in his efforts. While part of him felt excitement, the dominant thought was an acute awareness of how high the stakes had risen. A public platform could illuminate his vision, but it could equally amplify his shortcomings. Jake paced around his living room, battling the mounting tension within him. He recognized this as a defining moment. Was he ready to showcase his passion, or would self-doubt render him invisible? He made a decision. He would ask the reporter for a chance to feature not just his project, but also the stories of the individuals he aimed to help. It was risky. Turning his focus outward also meant vulnerability. He wouldn't just share his purpose, he'd unveil the very human stories behind it. Armed with his phone, he typed out a response. I appreciate your interest. I'd love to talk about how we can share not just the initiative itself, but also the faces and stories within our community that guide this effort. When can we discuss this? Hitting send felt cathartic, a release of tension that had coiled tightly since his initial outreach. Yet the fleeting comfort was instantly replaced by doubt. What have I done? He questioned. He was now accountable, not just to himself, but to a wider audience who may not share his vision. Throughout the day, his inner dialogue became a cacophony of worries. With the reporter on board, he wanted to discuss real, personal stories, ones that would resonate. Yet his mind drifted to the many individuals he had brushed shoulders with in the park. Would they trust him enough to share their experiences? The fear that they wouldn't be open to him, that he had no right to tell their stories, nagged relentlessly. That evening, after completing a few last-minute tasks, Jake strategized his outreach. He could start with people he had already met. The smoothie vendor, the high school students, Each had shown a spark of engagement. He needed to return to them, not only to solidify past connections, but to invite them into the narrative. He imagined their faces lighting up in recognition, but doubt crept in like a shadow. What if they didn't care to revisit? What if they saw the story he desired to share as nothing but an opportunistic ploy? Compelled by necessity rather than confidence, Jake devised a plan. He would create a leaflet, not to market himself, but as a genuine invitation, to participate in the narrative, to share their voices. As he sketched the outline, a more profound realization hit him. This wasn't merely about gathering stories. It was about creating a tapestry woven with the threads of vulnerability, strength, and collective experience. The next morning arrived, and as he stepped out to meet the day, confidence buzzed in his veins, mixed with the ever-present uncertainty. He was stepping into a new phase of his mission, one that challenged him not just to ask for stories, but to listen deeply, to immerse himself in the lives of others in a way he had not yet considered. But as he approached the park, an unsettling thought gnawed at him. Would those who once engaged so readily still reciprocate? Or would they see him as an outsider trying to exploit their truths? The weight of this doubt loomed over him, forming a stark barrier against the progress he sought. Undeterred, Jake took a deep breath, recognizing that the real story was about to unfold. He was on the precipice of confronting not just the community, but the echoes of his own fears that threatened to hold him back. What lay ahead could very well define not only his project, but the essence of his own character. As he stepped into the park, purpose-driven yet anxious, he didn't know that the unfolding narrative would lead to an unexpected confrontation. Would he be ready to face the true reality of his intentions? Or would he stumble over the complexities of human interaction he had blissfully ignored until today? Jake's heart raced as he stepped further into the park, the crisp morning air mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass. He scanned the familiar pathways, his mind racing with lists of potential stories, but anxiety clutched at him. Each moment felt charged, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting for him to breach the silence. Approaching the smoothie vendor, Jake noticed her setting up for the day. Her bright t-shirt bore the logo of a local charity, and for a fleeting second, he felt an echo of connection from their last brief conversation. He took a step toward her, but hesitated. What would he say? "Hi, can I take your story and use it in an article?" Seemed too blunt, too transactional for the approach he envisioned. Instead, he offered a genuine smile. "Hey, how's it going today? Do you have any new recipes?" Her face brightened, and he felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly as they exchanged small talk. As their conversation meandered, Jake felt a shift within him. He realized he wasn't just seeking a story. He was beginning to nurture a bond. After a few moments, he shifted the focus. "I've been thinking about how we can shine a light on the community's stories, the ones that make us all feel more connected. Would you be interested in sharing yours?" For a heartbeat, he feared her reaction. A skeptical glance, a dismissal that could crush the fragile bravado he had built. But she leaned in, her interest piqued. "You mean like how I started this business? It actually has a lot to do with giving back." Encouraged by her warmth, Jake felt an ignition of purpose. As she spoke, he dug deeper, asking about her motivations, her challenges, the people she served. Each detail was like a thread weaving a narrative tapestry, and with every response, he sensed their connection solidifying. Feeling emboldened, he decided to visit the group of high school students he had met during their volunteer event. As he approached them, the sight of their animated discussions brought an unexpected surge of nostalgia. He recalled the doubt they had expressed when he first introduced his ideas, the way they hesitated before committing to their involvement. But today, instead of feeling ambivalent, Jake was galvanized. "Hey, can we chat for a second?" he asked, breaking into their circle. The laughter dimmed, replaced with curious glances. He introduced his purpose plainly, grounding himself in sincerity, rather than the fear of rejection. "I want to share your stories. They matter. I want people to understand what you're passionate about." Silence hung thick in the air. The group exchanged looks, and Jake swallowed hard, prepared for the potential refusal. But one girl, her arms crossed defiantly, nodded slowly. Yeah, I think that would be cool. It's not just about the projects. It's about the journey. Jake's heart raced again, this time in an exhilarated rhythm. He hadn't anticipated this response, and suddenly, his confidence began expanding like a balloon, filling the space where doubt had anchored itself. Yet even amidst this budding success, another flicker of fear lingered. What if they opened up and he didn't do their stories justice? What if he became a vessel for their voices, only to convey them poorly? He wrestled with this and recognized it as the fork in the road he had anticipated, to move forward or let fear hijack his progress. He spent the rest of the day in relentless pursuit of voices to feature. Every encounter, every shared story became a lesson, crafting not just content for the article but deepening his understanding of the fabric binding those he had once viewed from a distance. As dusk settled, Jake stood in the park, feeling more grounded than when he first entered. He wanted to document their truths authentically, and in that quest, he found a sense of ownership over his purpose he hadn't felt before. But just as he prepared to leave, a figure emerged from the shade of a nearby tree, a familiar face from his earlier engagements. The look on their face was unreadable, and Jake felt a jolt of panic. Would they approach him as an ally, or as someone who had failed to honor their stories? The moment of confrontation loomed, and he realized this wasn't just a test of his resolve. It was a chance to genuinely engage with the very pulse of the community he sought to serve. Would he be deemed worthy of their trust, or would uncertainty unravel everything he had painstakingly constructed? The question hung in the air, heavy with potential. Jake shifted his weight, the pang of foreboding mixing uneasily with curiosity. The figure stepped closer, revealing it to be Melissa, one of the high school students he had spoken to earlier. Her posture was guarded, hands tucked into the pockets of her hoodie, but there was a flame of interest flickering in her eyes. Jake's mind raced, calculating the implications of this moment. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice steady yet cautious. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about sharing our stories." Time stretched, each second resonating with both anxiety and excitement. This was the moment, the direct confrontation he had both yearned for and dreaded. "Yeah? I believe your stories deserve to be told. They're important," he replied, forcing a calm demeanor despite an undercurrent of doubt. Melissa's brow furrowed slightly, and Jake could sense she was weighing her words carefully. "It's just, what if someone doesn't want to share? What if they don't trust you yet? You're asking to write our stories, but you're just a guy with a notebook." Her question pierced him. In that instant, he realized he hadn't fully considered the complexities of trust and vulnerability from their perspective. "You're right. I don't just want to take your stories. I want to honor them. But I also need you all to feel comfortable sharing what you're passionate about." He studied her expression, the flicker of understanding crossing her features. "Trust is a two-way street," he continued, grounding his voice. "What if we could do this together? You could help me understand how to present your experiences and perspectives." Something shifted in her demeanor, a break in her initial defensiveness. "That could be cool, actually," she replied, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. "But we've seen some reporters twist stories before. We need to talk about what makes them ours." The realization struck him like lightning. These students weren't just subjects for an article. They were collaborators in a larger narrative. "I can do that," he affirmed, his heart pounding with a newfound vigor. "This is about you, not me. Are you willing to lead the charge? To help me find the way?" Melissa nodded slowly, a cautious smile forming on her lips. "Yeah, I think I can do that." Jake felt a rush of elation. He could already envision the depth their collaboration would add to the piece, a true representation of their motivations and struggles told through their lens. Yet, intrigue turned into a moral dilemma. He needed to confront the fear of inadequacy that lurked in the corners of his mind. Would he be skilled enough to translate their raw stories into something meaningful? "Let's organize a time to sit down with the others," he suggested. "We'll draft our terms, how everything will be presented and what stays confidential." Melissa's energy amplified, her excitement infectious. "I can ask them in our group chat. We can make it a session where everyone can bring their thoughts." As the prospect of collaboration filled the air, Jake felt his doubts recede, replaced with anticipation. This was no longer just an article. It was a dare to explore, to delve deeper into narratives that spanned vulnerability, ambition, and resilience. But as they made their plans, Jake's attention wandered to a troubling thought. Would they feel safe enough to share the raw and unfiltered truths of their lives, knowing they were being documented? Could his writing responsibilities hold a mirror to the realities they faced? Or would he become yet another unreliable narrator in their journey? Determined, he turned back to Melissa, the resolve in his demeanor solidifying. "Together, we can make sure those stories are told authentically." Just as the plans took shape, the space seemed to constrict, as if the very universe were holding its breath. The park around them grew diffused in twilight, and Jake realized that even in this moment of connection, shadows lingered. Questions yet unanswered left burning in the heart of their budding partnership. But as the first stars broke through the dusky sky, Jake sensed a deeper challenge looming. This was merely the swirling prelude before the storm of truth, outcomes, and consequences awaited on the horizon. What would it take to bridge the gap between his ambition and their trust? The question loomed heavier than before, a reckoning waiting to unfold. The days leading up to the food drive were a whirlwind of activity, but Jake welcomed the chaos as a form of progress. With Melissa and her friends collaborating on the storytelling initiative, he felt a surge of purpose propelling him forward. Rather than merely being a pipeline for their experiences, he was now a conduit fostering their voices, an alliance based on trust and shared objectives. When the day of the food drive finally arrived, Jake awoke before dawn, nerves dancing in his stomach. He had expected apprehension, yet when he stood before the bustling crowd in the park, ready to lead, he felt something new, a palpable energy coursing through him, exuding confidence. The flickering doubts began to fade, replaced by a determined clarity, a fortification against the shadows of his past. As he set up the table adorned with banners and signs, Jake reflected on how far he had come from that hesitant figure walking the same streets mere weeks ago. The fraying threads of self-doubt had been woven into a resilient tapestry of community, determination, and authenticity. This was no longer just about him. It was about demonstrating commitment to those in need, to Lily, and to everyone who felt abandoned by circumstance. The crowd began to gather, and Jake's heart swelled as familiar faces appeared. The smoothie vendor, high school students, and citizens he had approached in past weeks, all here to support the cause. Each smile felt like a silent acknowledgement that he had successfully cultivated a sense of collective purpose. Their eyes held the promise of hope, a sentiment he hadn't experienced since returning home, and it filled him with resolve. With the event in full swing, Jake took the microphone, surveying the thriving assembly around him. "Thank you all for being here today," he called out, his voice firm and steady. "This is not just a food drive. It's an opportunity for us to stand together, to share our stories, and to build a stronger community." The crowd's enthusiastic applause surged in melody, bolstering his courage as he continued. He invited Melissa and her friends to join him, eager to share their stories. As he relayed their experiences, their carefully chosen words rang out, delineating the challenges they faced and the hopes they nurtured. With every story, Jake felt more secure in his role, not merely as a facilitator, but as a channel through which the community could express itself. Throughout the day, thousands of pounds of food were collected, but far more significant was the authentic connection established amongst the attendees. He witnessed the ripple effect of kindness. A stranger offered a can of food, which ignited exchanges of goodwill and encouragement. Fellow townsfolk began discussing previous hardships over shared laughter, fostering an environment he had long envisioned. Conversations ignited inspirations, and onlookers began pledging to contribute not just food, but time and resources to future initiatives. As the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and purple, Jake stood back and surveyed the bustling park filled with laughter and animated conversations. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of achievement wash over him. He realized that the transformation he had undergone wasn't just about dispelling his own doubts, but forging connection within a community yearning for solace and understanding. The day culminated in a moment of unforeseen recognition. Melissa stepped forward, her expression radiant as she addressed the crowd. "We did this together, and what Jake has succeeded in building is more than just a charity. It is trust, it is friendship, and it is a hopeful vision for our future." The warmth in the air shifted, and as applause thundered through the park, Jake felt the waves of acceptance crashing over him. No more whispers of doubt lingered. The townsfolk saw him as a genuine catalyst for change. His heart brimmed with gratitude, not just for the success of the day but for reclaiming his identity as a responsible, engaged member of the community. As the last of the donations were loaded onto the trucks, Jake stood reflective, Rex at his side, both of them slowly digesting the weight of this day. He understood now that growth did not come from the absence of struggle, but from navigating through it. He had conquered his fears and transformed them into the fuel that drove him to action. Stepping back into the vibrant hum of community, Jake took a deep, liberating breath. The uncertainty that once haunted him was replaced by clarity and solid confidence. He had achieved what he once thought impossible. He proved to himself and others that authenticity and determination can ignite real change. Today had become a milestone, not just for the town, but for him. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake felt the steady, immersive presence of hope surrounding him. He stood tall, finally realizing his worth, the warrior of his own story, who had emerged into the light. If you believe in the power of stories that inspire transformation, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for our journey through resilience and growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and signal your commitment to uplifting narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this emotional conclusion. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful message of overcoming obstacles. Don't wait even one more second. Let's spread the strength of personal stories together.